Rogier van der Weyden, B. Tilurnae, c. 1399, B. Brussels, 1464. The work of Rogier van der Weyden combines the expressive realism of his probable master, Robert Campin, with a deep spirituality and empathy. Rogier's most characteristic work is The Descent from the Cross, in which the grief of the Virgin Mary and Christ's attendants is palpable. All of his surviving works are religious subjects or portraits. The latter combine a Flemish attention to detail with flattery and piety. As with many early artists, very little is known about Rogier's life. He spent most of his career in Brussels, where he was the leading painter of th day, but nothing is recorded of his personality. There are no signed works, and paintings are attributed to him mainly on stylistic grounds. Although Rogier was famous in his lifetime with a busy workshop exporting copies of his paintings to France, Germany, Spain, and Italy, after he died his name gradually faded from view. It was only in the 20th century that his reputation regained its 15th century status. Lifeline. 1427 apprentice to Robert Campin. 1432 becomes master in Tournai's Painters Guild. 1436 is appointed official painter to City of Brussels. See 1445-50 Last Judgment altarpiece for hospital and bone. 1450 goes on pilgrimage to Rome. 1464 dies in Brussels. Descent from the Cross. For this scene, showing the lowering of Christ's body from the cross, Rogier painted a gold backdrop, so there is no depth. The effect is to thrust the highly realistic, grief-stricken players into the viewer's space, as if they are at the very front of a stage. See 1435, oil on panel, 220x262 cm, Prado, Madrid, Spain. Closer look. Echoing shapes. The pose of the swooning Mary repeats that of the dead Christ. Groups of 3 figures balance either side, while John the Baptist's red robe counters Joseph of Arimathea's gold brocade. Individual features, the faces, particularly of the men, are recognizable portraits. John the Baptist's youthful face is furrowed in concern as he supports the Virgin Mary. His ruddy glow contrasts with her deathly pale face. St. Luke drawing the Virgin. The window in this picture looks onto a Flemish city scene, in which a river winds with converging linear perspective into the distance. The silver point drawing that St. Luke is making was the usual first stage of a painting at this time. Sint 1435-40, oil and tempera on panel, 138x 111 centimeters, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, U.S. Rogier felt and expressed emotions and sensations, mostly of a bitter or bittersweet nature, that no painter had ever recaptured. Erwin Panofsky, art historian. Altarpiece of the Seven Sacraments, central panel. The red garments and white headdresses focus attention on the figures at the foot of the cross. They are set against the neutral tones of the architecture, which soars heavenward. See 1445-50, oil on panel, Koninklijke Museum. Antwerp, Belgium. Portrait of young woman in a pinned hat. Typically of Rogier's portraits, the young woman is seen half-length and in three-quarter view. Her pose shows devoutly clasped hands and a fashionable high waistline. 1435, oil and panel, 47 by 32 centimeters, Gemäldegalerie Gallery, Berlin, Germany. Hugo van der Goes. Begent, c. 1440, De Rode Klooster, near Brussels, 1482. The reputation of Hugo van der Goes rests on the one piece of work that he certainly painted, the Portinari altarpiece. However, on the strength of stylistic similarity, a handful of other paintings are also attributed to him. The Portinari altarpiece shows Hugo's ability to arrange groups of figures within a realistic setting and to portray intense emotion. He applies his Flemish love of naturalistic detail and surface texture to the symbolic objects in the foreground of the picture, as well as to the rich fabrics. Set against such realism, Hugo uses the medieval device of including the figures of the donors, who commission the altarpiece, in the foreground, but showing them much smaller than the important religious figures behind them. When Portinari, a Medici agent in Bruges, took this altarpiece back home to Florence, it influenced local artists such as Ghirlandaio. Lifeline. 1440 born in Ghent, 1467 becomes Master the Painters Guild of Ghent, c. 1474-78 paints the Portinari altarpiece. 1475 becomes Dean of the Painters' Guild. Enters the monastery of Rode Klooster, near Brussels. 1482 dies, having suffered a mental breakdown the previous year. The Fall of Man and the Redemption. Hugo revels in the details of foliage, and in the hybrid serpent in the Garden of Eden. Atmospheric perspective, the blue background, gives the landscape depth. In both panels, the figures are arranged in a diagonal slope from left to right, echoing the descent of man in Christ. After c. 1480, oil on panel, 32 by 22 cm and 34 x 23 cm, Kunsthistorisches Museum, Vienna, Austria. The Portinari altarpiece. This central panel shows the adoration of the Christ child. Instead of lying on Mary's lap or in a manger, he is isolated on the bare ground, radiating light. c. 1474-78, tempera and oil in panel, 253 by 304 cm, Uffizi, Florence, Italy. Closer look. Psychological sympathy. The humble status of the shepherds is raised by the rapt expressions on their faces. This tightly knit group contrasts with the solitary subject of their worship. In context. The Golden Legend. This 13th century collection of saints' lives was a source book for Renaissance artists. It included, for instance, the story of St. Luke drawing the Virgin Mary's portrait, a tale that made him the patron saint of many painters' guilds. About 900 manuscripts of the Golden Legend survive, and after the invention of printing it became the most popular book in 15th century Europe. Manuscript page from the Golden Legend by Jacobus de Voragine, 14th century. Petrus Christus. B. Barrel Duc? c. 1410, D. Bruges, 1475-76. Petrus Christus is credited with being the first Northern European artist to use geometrically accurate perspective in his Madonna with Two Saints of 1457. He was the leading artist in Bruges in the generation after Jan van Eyck. Christus may indeed have been one of Van Eyck's pupils and have completed some of his unfinished works. He certainly helped to spread Van Eyck's naturalism. Like him, Christus observed and recorded details of the world around him with meticulous accuracy. In his religious scenes, Christus borrowed from both Van Eyck and Rogier van der Weyden. He shows greater individuality in indoor scenes, especially his portraits. Gone are the blank backgrounds of earlier artists. Instead, he provides a room setting that complements the realism with which he depicts the sitter's particular features. The Death of the Virgin. The use of perspective was intended by Flemish artists to increase the sense of space in all directions, not to unify the scene, as for Italian painters. The spatial setting is detailed, and the figures at the door and window lead the eye into the world outside. A limited palette of red, black, and earth tones unifies the various elements. 1460-65, oil and panel, 171 x 138 centimeters, Timken Museum of Art, San Diego, U.S. Edward Grimston Christus portraits were his most successful works. Here, the sitter's face eyelet from the side, so the artist can model the features with a full range of tones. 1446, oil on panel, 33 by 24 centimeters, Earl of Verulam collection, on loan to National Gallery, London, UK. The Lamentation over the Dead Christ. This composition is based on Rogier van der Weyden's Lamentation, but the result is less dramatic. Oil and panel, 101 x 192 cm, Musées Royaux, Brussels, Belgium. Hans Memling. BSELIGNSTDT, c. 1435-40, D. Bruges, 1494. Born in Germany, Memling, or Memling, became the leading painter in Bruges after the death of Christus. Tradition has it that he trained under Rogier van der Weyden. Memling had a large workshop, and many of his small altarpieces were exported to Italy. The style of his background landscapes, with a blue and hazy far distance, influenced Italian artists, such as Perugino. Memling had the skill of creating an intimate Madonna and child scene in a setting that approximated to an Italian palace in a Flemish landscape, a hybrid style that appealed both at home and abroad. His success brought him wealth. He was one of Bruges' richest citizens. Benedetto Portinari, the sitter for this portrait, was a Florentine agent of the Medici Bank. Memling puts this pious memorial in a realistic setting. 1487, oil on panel, 45x34 cm, Uffizi, Florence, Italy. Triptych of St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist flanked by the two Johns, shown in other scenes from their lives in the outer panels. The Virgin and Child are also accompanied by female saints. St. Catherine has the wheel she was tortured on, and St. Barbara the tower she was locked in. See 1474-79, oil on panel, Memling Museum, Bruges, Belgium. In context. Bruges. In this period, Bruges was drifting into financial decline. Once an international trading center where European merchants bought Flemish cloth, it was superseded by Antwerp, with its bigger harbor, during the 16th century. Town plan of Bruges as it was in the 16th century. Geertgen tot St. Jans. B. Leiden? C. 1460. D. Haarlem? C. 1490. Very little is known of Geertgen, whose full name means Little Gerard of the Brotherhood of St. John, after the religious order in Haarlem of which he was a lay brother. Paintings are attributed to him by their stylistic similarity to two works, the Lamentation of Christ and the Burning of the Bones of St. John the Baptist, which are known to be by him. Geertgen added a new element of humility to the devotional works of the northern Netherlands. He relied on radiant light, slender, childlike figures, and naturalism to convey his holy vision. The nativity light emanates from the Christ child, revealing the tender look on his mother's face. A campfire on the hillside lights up the angel. Late 15th century, oil and panel, 34x25 cm, National Gallery, London, UK. The Resurrection of Lazarus. The high viewpoint shows Lazarus stepping out of his coffin after Jesus miraculously raises him from the dead. The detailed landscape is typically Flemish. Late 15th century, oil and panel, 127x97 cm, Louvre, Paris. Dieric Bouts. B. Haarlem? C. 1420, Blouvin, 1475. Dieric, or Dirk, Bouts is remembered chiefly for his long, thin figures and also for the beauty of his landscape settings, in which the foreground slides seamlessly and continuously into the far distance. He used paths and walls to lead the eye from one figure to the next, and to coax the viewer into enjoying the full illusion of depth. His backgrounds gradually become lighter and bluer, imitating the natural effects of atmospheric perspective. Bouts' early life is obscure, but he probably moved from Haarlem to Louvain in the early 1460s. He received a major commission in 1464 for the altarpiece for the chapel of Th Confraternity of the Holy Sacrament at St. Peter's in Louvain. Bouts set the narrative events in his paintings in his own day. The figures often looked like people he knew, dressed in contemporary costume, and mingled with imaginary characters. The realistic space, landscape, and faces contrast with the stiffly elongated figures, unemotional in the face of the gory events. The Last Supper in this central panel from the Louvain altarpiece. Bouts uses linear perspective in the converging lines of the room to create a sense of depth. The meal takes place in a light-filled room with Gothic arches, complete with contemporary details, such as the double portrait hanging on the wall. 1464-68, oil and panel, 180 by 151 centimeters, St. Peter's, Louvain, Belgium. The Justice of the Emperor Otto Town halls were often decorated with justice scenes. Here Bouts uses his adopted city of Louvain as the backdrop for the grisly tale. The emperor's wife attempted to seduce a nobleman and later accused him of rape. Her husband had the man beheaded before the truth came out, and she was shot or burned at the stake. 1470-75, oil on panel, 32 by 1,582 centimeters, Musées Royaux, Brussels, Belgium. Closer look. Catching attention, the condemned man, wrongly convicted of rape, is shown twice. In the foreground, his decapitated body spews blood while behind him, again in white, he earlier pleads his innocence to his wife. The V-shaped group of figures converges on the arrow-like tower in the top left-hand corner. Nuno Gongalves. Active Portugal, 1450-71. While there are no certain works by Gongalves, The 6-paneled St. Vincent polyptych is attributed to him on good evidence. Made in Lisbon, it is the most impressive painting produced in Portugal during the 15th century. Shortly before Gongalves painted it, Jan van Eyck was sent by the Duke of Burgundy to paint a Portuguese princess whom he had in mind as a potential wife. Gongalves's work shows the influence of Van Eyck and other Flemish artists such as Bouts in his concentration on surface texture and color and his interest in individualized faces. The panels show an array of people, from fishermen to monks to royalty, venerating Saint Vincent, the patron saint of Lisbon. Saint Vincent of Saragossa. The portrait of Saint Vincent, the patron saint of Lisbon, is idealized, while all the other faces are of real people. The saint's gorgeously embroidered deacon's garment outshines that of the prince, kneeling in supplication, and the haughty archbishop in gold. See 1466-70, oil on panel, 207 x 128 cm, National Museum, Lisbon, Portugal. Enguerrand Quarton. Active province 1444, d. 1466. This French artist is documented as working in Aix, Arles, and Avignon, but his only two certain works are the Madonna of Mercy and Coronation of the Virgin. Their quality has caused scholars to tentatively attribute to him the Louvre's Avignon Pietà, widely considered to be the greatest French painting of the time. The Coronation of the Virgin is an ambitious work, encapsulating a great deal of Christian doctrine. The top 2/3 of the painting is devoted to a serene vision of heaven, while the bottom third is crammed full with earthly figures panicking at the Last Judgment. Christ, depicted on the cross, links the two realms. Madonna of Mercy. The Madonna appears as a monumental protector. The figures resemble sculptures of the region at the time. 1452, oil on panel, 66 x 187 cm, Musée Condé, Chantilly, France. Coronation of the Virgin. Areas of white lead the eye up in loops to the dove, the Holy Ghost, and the arms of God the Father and Son crowning Mary Queen of Heaven. 1453-54, oil on panel, 183 by 220 cm, Musée des Hospices, Villeneuve-l'Avignon, France. Bartolomé Bermejo. B. Córdoba? C. 1440, D. Barcelona? C. 1498. Mixing the intense religious feeling of the Spanish with the naturalistic detail of the Flemish, Bermejo was the leading painter of the 15th century in Spain. The dynastic marriage joining the Spanish kingdoms of Castile and Aragon increased the trade links with Flanders and made travel for artists and diplomats both possible and necessary. Bermejo worked in various cities of northern Spain and may have been apprenticed in Bruges. Such attention to detail, beloved of Gothic and Flemish artists, was made easier by the introduction of oil paint, and Bermejo was one of the first to use it in Spain. His real name was Bartolomé de Cardenas, and his nickname Bermejo, red, is more likely to refer to his appearance than his color palette. The descent of Christ into limbo from the ground in front of the figures, littered with skulls and snakes, to the background trees and hills, Bermejo displays a Flemish-influenced love of naturalistic detail. The realism of the figures is almost exaggerated. See 1480, oil on panel, 89 by 68 cm, Museo de Arte de Catalunya, Barcelona, Spain. Closer look. Tonal contrast glowing from the fires of hell on one side and Christ's halo at the other. A swathe of light adds pathos to the plight of the supplicating sinners. Jean Fouquet. B. Tours, c. 1420, D. Tours, c. 1481. The leading French painter of the 15th century, Fouquet had a uniquely cool, severe style. Influenced by both Italian and Flemish art, he created his own brand of realism with sculptural figures, chiseled features, simplified forms, and broad expanses of color. Fouquet excelled equally as manuscript illuminator and a painter on wood panel. He worked a good deal for the court, which at this time was based in his hometown of Tours. His patrons included Etienne Chevalier, the royal treasurer under Charles VII. For him, Fouquet produced both a Book of Hours and his most famous painting, the Memling Geertgen. TS 2 panels are now in different galleries, one in Germany and the other in Belgium. The likeness of the kneeling chevalier is accurate, as is known from other portraits of him. His namesake Saint Stephen, Etienne in Old French, puts a protective arm around him, but otherwise appears oblivious to the rock with which he will be martyred or the blood already trickling down the back of his head. In contrast to the realism of the left-hand panel, Mary is an idealized if improbable Madonna, held adrift from time and space by cherubs. Lifeline. 1444 paints portraits of Charles VII. 1446-48 probably visits Rome. C1 450-60 creates a book of hours for Etienne Chevalier. 1452 paints the Memling diptych. 1474 designs for the Louis tomb. 1475 made royal painter. Etienne Chevalier and Saint Stephen Fouquet makes no attempt to flatter the face of Chevalier, the powerful donor who commissioned the altarpiece, giving him a long nose and grimly compressed mouth. Chevalier kneels in a classical Italian interior with accurate perspective. Fouquet deliberately sets the realism of the earthly realm apart from the ethereal world of the Virgin and Child in the right wing of this diptych, right, with Saint Stephen bridging the two. C. 1452, left wing of the Memling diptych, oil on panel, 93 x 85 cm, Gemäldegalerie, Gallery, Berlin, Germany. Virgin and Child 7. He Virgin's face is said to be modeled on that of Agnes Sorel, Charles VI's mistress. One pneumatic breast is bared, although she is not nursing the Christ child, who points at Chevalier in the left wing of this diptych, below. She has an hourglass figure and fashionably shaved hair, giving her a high, bulbous forehead. 1452, right wing of the Memling diptych, oil on panel, 94 x 85 cm, Koninklijk Museum, Antwerp. Closer look. Color contrasts while the flesh and cloak of the Virgin and Child look as cool and chiseled as marble. The framework of cherubs and seraphs is composed of vivid reds and blues. Each face is seen from a different angle and, although the coloring differs quite starkly, the forms are stylized and simplified in an appeal to rational order. Be equals rather than emotion. In context. Joan of Arc. Fouquet owed his patronage indirectly to Joan of Arc and her part in restoring the French monarchy. Charles VI of France died in 1422, and England tried to claim the throne. As a teenager, Joan heard voices that inspired her to lead the crusade that restored Charles VII to his throne. He made no attempt to save her from her fate. She was burned at the stake as a witch and heretic in 1431. But the English were successfully routed. Under Charles's son, Louis XI, royal patronage of the arts flourished. Joan of Arc was eventually made a saint in 1920. Signature of Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc's crusade ended centuries of struggle for power and territory between England and France. Thanks to her, Charles Villèle was crowned at Reims in 1429.